Welcome to the Start With Heart podcast, hosted by The Collective. My name is Brad Stinson, my co-host Danny Williamson. Awesome, and we are excited to have Curtis Zackery, or who we like to call CZ, with us today. He's a husband, father, speaker, pastor, writer, flat bill wearing sneakerhead, who we like to call our friend.
Yes, that is the greatest introduction I've ever heard in my life.
Yes. All right. Good. Yes. All right. So let's start with this podcast. When we say start with heart, what's the first thing that comes to your mind and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful name for a podcast. Number one, so kudos on that. Two, I think what immediately comes to mind for me is really starting from the center of things, like starting from the middle. And I can see so many different kind of images in my own brain when it comes to that idea. And starting with the heart is really just kind of like, what's the essence, what's the why behind everything? And I've really been asking those questions myself a lot in my own journey, in our own family, in life and vocation. You know, the why is so important, and to start with the heart is really to understand exactly the essence, the motivations, the ethos, what makes up the composition of what something is. And so it can go in a lot of different directions, but for me personally, it's really just the why behind the what, the essence of what something is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, that's great.
It's good. So CZ, you recently wrote a book, released in June, I believe, called Soul Rest. And so it'd be great if you could share a little bit of backstory to that, why you wrote it, and kind of what initiated your heart to bring attention to this.
Yeah, I never really set out to write a book in order to be an author by vocation. It wasn't really something that I had a great bit of aspiration toward. I'm a creative, so writing is definitely something that's a part of my life and my story as an expression.
Sure.
But even starting out to write this particular book, it really was rooted in my own journey to document things that I had walked through in my own situation. And the book is called Soul Rest because I felt like God was inviting me into the investigation to figure out what that meant for my own life. Mm-hmm. My wife and I had moved to the Bay Area, a city called Richmond, California, which really was an interesting time for us. We were kind of just saying yes to the next right thing. We were trying to figure out what it meant to honor and serve God with our life, with our vocation, with our gifts. And we had moved to serve a small church plant in an under-resourced area, and it was a completely different thing for us, and we had never really been a part of something like that. And during that time, I think one of the most overwhelming realities that I had bumped into was I was attempting in my life to do a lot of good things for people and ultimately for God. But in my working and straining and striving to keep that up, started to realize that there was a fatigue that was growing within me that was a little bit deeper than just like a vacation or some time off. It was kind of like a deep tired that I didn't know how to remedy. And it started to concern me because I'd only been there for about a year, and I was already starting to realize I don't know how to sustainably keep this up, doing all the things that we were doing, which was all good work. We were helping homeless friends find places to live. We were helping people walk through recovery situations. And so all of the things that we were doing were good things. But I just knew so much of what I was doing was really formed out of my own ability and my own kind of willpower to keep it going. Yeah. And that was getting exhausting. I didn't know how to figure out ways to sustainably keep that going. So there was this growing tension within me of that reality being true. And at the same time, my wife and I were hopeful about having a family. And we had been married for about 5 years at the time, and we were really excited about the prospect of having kids. And I remember when my wife told me she was pregnant, and we were overjoyed and nervous and excited and terrified. You know, it's all the feelings. And just a couple of days after we found out we were pregnant, at our first doctor's appointment, they let us know that we had lost the pregnancy. And that was devastating. You know, it was one of those things that you can't really prepare for. Hadn't really had a lot of conversations around it. We were still hopeful to have a family, but then at the same time very cautious and very nervous about it. We became pregnant again about 6 months later. We carried further into our pregnancy the second time, but again experienced loss. And the second time was really physically and emotionally taxing on us in ways that we couldn't have ever anticipated. And so I think the tension of the wrestle with trying to figure out my identity, how and why I would live out the way that I was living, that coupled with experiencing loss was just kind of too much to bear. And I think the third factor in that was that we really felt like we were alone. We felt like we felt lonely and on an island in it. We had people around us. It wasn't an issue of a deficiency of relationship, but I think it was just the substantive connection to the belief that we were in it with other people experiencing what we were experiencing. So that's a really long way of laying out kind of the foundation for me getting to a point where at the three of those things intersecting, I realized I can't go on living like this and something needs to change. And I kind of prayed a prayer to God and asked him, what is the thing that you would have for me, through tears? And he just kind of spoke to my heart and said, you need rest for your soul. Wow. And I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like, and kind of set me on a journey for about a year-long process of introspection and soul care, self-care, counseling, conversations, running, crying, just all of it. And what resulted was a beautiful reformation of my life, and then that kind of resulted in what I wrote in that book.
Amazing.
I wanted to ask, because I'm about third of the way through reading and everything right now, and one of the things that struck me that I think Danny and I were talking about it is that phrase where he said, it's okay not to be okay. Can you just talk about that just a little bit? Because I think that we try to put on fronts when we're men, or even women, or whatever, in the world, whatever, but like just that whole, it's okay not to be okay, and just if you can expound on that a little bit, because I think that the listeners would love to hear that, because I think that's just something that we need to understand.
Yeah, I know for me, when I was walking through a season of loss and grief and just trying to process what was happening around us and in us and to us, so many of my impulses were to move to a place where I would just kind of move past it, just say, let me just keep going. I would even quote to myself verses from the Bible. God works everything together for the good of those who love him. Like, he's going to do something with this. He's working something out, even in ways that I can't see. And so that was true. I knew all of those things that I'd read and were written and were even being quoted to me were true. But I think the problem with it is sometimes I can move past where I currently am with the hope that things will change and get better without ever really realizing what I'm actually feeling right now. And so I remember I had a friend who said to me on the phone during that season, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And at first I kind of said, yeah, I know that that's true. And he just repeated it again and said, hey, listen, it's okay to not be okay. And I think on the second pass of saying that to me, it helped me to realize my impulse, my desire was to try to figure it out myself, like just try to walk and will myself through the difficulty of the painful situation. And what he was trying to communicate to me, and I think what ultimately God was saying to me through him, was you need to sit for a minute and understand what it is that you're actually feeling, what you're experiencing in your pain, not so that it can define who you are, not so that it can overcome your situation, but simply because I needed to understand what it was specifically I was asking God to enter into and to heal. And so he wanted me to look fully at the thing that I was feeling rather than trying to justify it or explain it away. He was saying, no, understand that you are in a hurting place. Understand why you're hurting. Then invite me into that space. So it's okay to not be okay, I think, is an important thing for us to know as people, because we try to just move past it. The other thing I would say, though, is I'm so thankful that that person said it's okay to not be okay. But I wish someone would have said, and I'm thankful that the Spirit of God kind of entered in, because it's okay to not be okay, but whether you believe it or not, there's a living hope in Jesus. That's kind of the thing that I needed to hear alongside of that, because it's okay to not be okay, but that can also become a definition for who you are moving forward. Like, I know a lot of people who have been trying to put on a front in their life around spirituality or like the type of person that they am, and they finally feel a freedom connected to acknowledging, okay, like, I got junk going on, I got stuff in my life, and it's okay to not be okay. So now that becomes the definition of who I am. And so I'm kind of like, living in this space where nothing is good. It's all just kind of like, I'm okay to be free inside of my misery almost, But that's not what God desires for us. I think God desires for us to find a hopefulness connected to Him. But I think the beauty of what we see in the example of the scriptures is there are times where there's the admission that I'm not okay right now. But even those people are acknowledging, there's a living God. I don't know how I feel about Him right now. I don't know how I feel about the belief that this can actually happen for me. But I do believe that my aspiration is completely and solely founded in the hope that if that's not true, that there's a living God, then I don't know where else to turn. And so what I've found is it's really helpful in these conversations to say, it's okay to not be okay. So own and lean into the spaces that are hurting and broken. But whether you believe it or not right now, like, you need to know that there's a living hope in Jesus. And for myself, I know that there have been times where it's like, I just don't know how I feel about this right now. I don't know that this is true to me right now. And I see examples of David in the Bible talking about, in Psalm 13, how long, O Lord, will you hide your face from me forever? How long must my enemy triumph over me? Answer me, O Lord, right? This is scripture. This is in the Bible. So he, in that, was wrestling with the reality of his own belief about what God was going to do for him. So he was admitting he was not okay. But even as you look at the rest of that psalm, you see that there's this aspiration that God would do something. But also, I love how he finishes that particular psalm, because he says, in the past you've dealt bountifully with me. So he's like going, hey, in the past you did some stuff. And it's only because of that I'm going to give you the benefit of that. I don't believe it right now, but because you did some stuff in the past. And so I say all that to say, that's why it's important for us, I think, in our life together to admit that it's okay to not be okay. But we don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay stuck there. We want to ask God in His work, by His power, to pull us out.
That's great. That's great. Now, in regards to this whole idea of soul rest, because I know when I heard about your book coming out and talking to you about it, and even when I bought it, it was just like, just that topic alone, like soul rest. One, I felt like I need that. But with that, I'm sure you've run across some misunderstandings when people hear rest or even soul rest. So what are some of those misunderstandings or myths maybe that come along with that?
Yeah. Well, I think anytime you see or hear the word rest, it becomes an either-or prospect. Some people believe, if you're going to rest, then that means you're entering into a space that's devoid of work. So it's either work or rest.
Interesting.
And for us in our culture, the idea of being absent of work is just ridiculous, because we're in a fast-paced culture. There's a lot of stuff going on in our lives. And so the thought that there would be a time where you could enter into uninterrupted rest, this deep rest, is almost this unrealistic prospect, because, man, I got a lot of stuff to do, whether it's at my job or the things that are expected of me, or I have a family, I have kids, I have stuff going on. So it's not like I could just tap out of life and now all of a sudden just go into this space of rest. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that rest only comes apart from work. I think that the idea of soul rest is really that we would find rest inside of our work, because rest that we're talking about is not simply just physical. It's also not just a break. It's not just vacation. It's not just time off. The rest that we're talking about is a deep and soulish contentment. I think that that's kind of the idea that God was putting forward from the beginning. Like, God created humanity with the purpose that they would be soulishly, that they would be completely satisfied in Him. That's how He made humanity from the beginning. And we know the greatest problem in all the Bible, sin, in Genesis 3, separates what God had intended for humanity to experience. So from that moment, all of humanity is groaning and longing to be restored back to that contentment that comes in a connection with God, the God who created us for that. In Ecclesiastes 3, there's a verse that says that God set eternity in the hearts of men. And what he's saying in that is when we were made with an innate awareness of God, an innate longing for God. So it's this soulish longing, right? It's this hole in our hearts, so to speak, that can only be filled by God. And what we know to be true is we try to fill that longing with things that are not eternal. Fill an eternal longing with things that are temporary. Yeah. And that will never work. And so what I realized is God intended for humanity to have this deep soulish contentment, this rest, that their foundation, their very essence would be satisfied by God alone. And the misconception would be, oh, well, we can only find rest when we stop working. Well, there's a Psalm 127, and it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen watch in vain. That verse to me, I feel like, really typifies what we can benefit from, especially in a culture like 2018 in America. Because what it's essentially saying is, there is the great builder, there's the general contractor, right? This is God who's watching over everything. But the thing that you see in that verse is, we continue to work. They're still working. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. So there's still laborers. Yeah. But what he's saying is, we can build and build for our own purposes. If we're not building for God, then that's when we find ourselves striving and straining and it's empty. Same thing about watching over the city. I love that. I think about parenting a lot when I read that verse, because it's like we parent and we watch over our little city. And if we're doing that in our own building, our own kingdom, and not really heeding that there's a great watchman, we're kind of doing that in vain. And then he goes on to say in that psalm, early you rise and late you go to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. So basically what he's saying is you can get up early, do hard work, go to bed late, do hard work, but if you're doing it for your own purposes, your only reward is the bread of anxious toil. That's all you're getting. You're not even being satisfied. But then there's a semicolon right after that. It says, but he gives to his beloved rest. That's his desire. So the great misconception that I run into is that rest only comes apart from work, and that our hope is abandon work, forget about work, go live in this weird monk-like state, right? And just do, but really what God is trying to get after is there's a deep soulish contentment, and that rest can come while we're working.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good.
So on this, and what we've talked about many times and stuff, I want to know what makes your heart beat the most about this. Like this stuff, what makes your heart beat, man? It just makes you go. What's that look like?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy for me. I feel like the aspiration toward the idea that people would find rest in their own lives, in their own daily and family rhythms is just such a beautiful prospect to me, because I think what I've realized in my study of all this, giving my life and my time to studying on these ideas, is for me, I just see how it all kind of funnels down into the same idea. And for me personally, I believe it centers on the story of the gospel. I feel like all that we're talking about is this deep soulish longing that can only find deep soulish contentment in what I believe to be the finished work of Jesus. And it's through the finished work of Jesus that our striving, our straining, our working to find righteousness and goodness on earth, it becomes satisfied, not by what we can do, but by what he's already done. And so inviting people into that story, inviting people into the opportunity to understand that that's available to us on earth is a game changer. It makes me stay up at night thinking about what that could mean for people who are feeling dry and tired and lonely or hopeless. I feel like the resolution is the same for all of us. So to help us to find rest is really what makes my heart beat. I think about my own story, and there was a quote by a guy named Soren Kierkegaard, and he says, "It is absolutely unethical when one becomes so busy communicating that he forgets to be what he teaches." And for me, I think about my own life and how so much of what I've done, so many things that I've formed out in my ideas and my practice and my building and my making and my doing was really even motivated and predicated by the idea of doing it for God. But the problem is I know what it means to live for God and yet not experience God in the midst of living for God, right? Like I know what it means to do a bunch of Jesus stuff in the name of Jesus, but not be experiencing connection with Jesus myself. Mm-hmm. And so what makes my heart beat is the thought that people who are a part of churches or working at churches or serving in ministry, or people who've never been in a church before, who are longing for some sense of hope, to realize that the resolution is the exact same thing, that the resolution is at the foot of the cross in the finished work of Jesus, that rest comes from the realization that we don't need to carry our own righteousness on our own shoulders. And what's so amazing about that message is you have somebody who maybe doesn't know who Jesus is or care about church or anything like that, but they feel like the definition of who they are as a good person is really predicated by their own actions, their own effort, their own life, right? Somebody inside of church could be feeling the exact same thing. You could be a follower of Jesus and still feel like every bit of your life is determined by how many good things you do, how much church you attend, how many times you read the Bible. And what we're realizing is all of those things are good things. And we can do good things even outside the realm of the church or following Jesus. But it's only in Christ that we find true significance, true substance. So that's what makes my heart beat. Just inviting people into the opportunity to hear that story and to know that there's life there, there's rest at the foot of the cross.
Absolutely.
Tell me.
Yeah.
So what makes your heart break?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that come to mind as soon as you say that. I think the first one is really kind of in direct juxtaposition to what I just said. You know, in the book of Galatians, Paul is talking to a group of people, and he is sharing with them the importance of understanding this marriage or this connection between the law that had been established and what was right to follow God and how you found righteousness in your life. And then this idea of grace that came from the work of Jesus on the cross. And he goes back and forth talking to these people in this letter that he wrote in the Bible to this crew that are trying to figure out how to honor and live for God. And what he was realizing is they'd heard the message that we just talked about, that in Christ there's finished work, there's grace, there's life, there's flourishing, right? But then after hearing that message, this group of people, once he kind of goes away from them, says, all right, yeah, that's cool that Jesus did all that stuff. But now we got to determine and establish and work to say who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong. Our work determines how righteous we really are. And he kind of comes back to them and says, wait a minute. No, it's through Jesus that we find significance and worth and value and identity, not through your work. And they're going, oh, yeah. But still, let me just show you how much I can do and who needs to do what and what kind of rules you need to follow. And I think you see Paul in Galatians displaying on paper his broken heart for these people, because what he sees is them missing the opportunity to fully live on earth. And I think that that's really been increasingly growing as an issue of heartbreak for me. It's the thought that we could be in church attempting to follow and honor God with our lives, with our worship, with the things that we do, with our participation. And yet while we're doing all of those things, it could be lifeless, it could be dry, we could be tired, we can be hopeless, though we know these things are good and important. And maybe it's not even a positional issue with God. Maybe we're okay with God as far as like our later on after we die kind of standing. But what God continually says through his scripture is that we can be fully alive here on earth. You know, John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I've come to give you life and life more abundantly. John 8:36, he who the Son sets free is free indeed. Paul in that book Galatians we were talking about says it is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm and don't return to slavery, right? So he's talking about there's this freedom that's available. And so it breaks my heart when we have allowed ourselves in our pursuit of following Jesus to let it become mundane and dry and something that's lifeless. And it breaks my heart, not because it's something we need to be doing, but it breaks my heart because I'm saying, man, there's a taste and see kind of thing happening. Like if we can understand how this could change our lives, our families, our situations. The other thing that I think breaks my heart and comes to my mind is just injustice in the world. You know, I think, righteousness and justice throughout the scriptures are completely intertwined. They are absolutely connected. You see that vividly in the Old Testament, but as you move into the New Testament, those words are actually kind of melded together when you read the scriptures. Righteousness and justice. And so when we look into our world and we see issues of injustice, it should break our hearts as people to see that people are being wronged and hurt and broken in a societal structure that sometimes doesn't do well to serve specific areas and groups of people. And so I think one of the things that's true for all of us is we have discontent in our hearts, like a righteous or a holy discontent that we look at and go, man, that's not the way it should be. I want to contend for what is right. And I think injustice in various ways is one of those things that breaks my heart when I think about it.
Awesome. It's crazy. I read Galatians 5 and 6 this morning.
Hey, come on.
Go, man.
It's almost like God knows what he's doing.
Crazy.
How about that?
Like, no joke. That was
I love
my thing. I can show you a text. And then with all this, and all this is stirring everything, like, what difference do you want to make in the world? With this that's been put on your heart, what you're doing, like, what difference do you want to make with this and moving forward? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, if I could really kind of make it as simple as possible, I really want people to feel seen, heard, known, and loved. I want people to feel seen in their various situations, in their respective stories. I think one of the things that I've experienced, and I think we all experience at times, is we feel as though we're alone in our own journey. We're alone in our process, and that looks different for different people. But I just know it feels so incredible to know that you are seen, like to feel seen, like you are not by yourself. You're not just wandering the earth, meandering around, but you are seen, not only by other people, but more importantly by God. So I want people to feel seen, to feel known, that their story matters, like what's happening in their life actually matters. That's really important to me. Heard is really important because I just think about how listening is in short supply in our world. We're not a listening culture. We like to talk. It's really even the increase of popularity of podcasts. It's like what we're doing right now. It's like we like to talk, but when it comes to an actual conversation, I realize in my own life, I want to grow as a listener. And the reason I want to grow as a listener is because I know what it feels like to actually be heard in my situation. Yeah. And so I want to try to introduce that into people's lives, that they would feel heard and loved. Obvious one for me, but I just feel like if we could know that we are loved, it could change the way that we live here on earth. I think about so many friends that I've known, that I've experienced major kind of moral failures, some of them on a national scale. I think about people who, just even recently, I just attended a couple days ago, a friend of mine's father committed suicide. And, I just know of stories of pastors and friends who've done the same thing or gotten close to doing the same thing. And so much of the story interwoven into that is this lack of awareness of knowing and understanding that they are loved, And I don't mean to be reductionistic in that. It's not to try to minimize, but I just know for myself, the idea of feeling loved inside of my own situation is such a hope of just all of those things coming together, seen, heard, known, all of those things is really just kind of compiling into one place. So that's really what I want to do. I want to do everything I can to serve other people, invite people into the story of God so that they would experience and know those things.
That's great.
Awesome. So transition here a little bit. We're going to do we're going to show some photos. And with that, how people say, it's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see a photo. I want you to you can process that, but then I want to know what's the first thing that comes to your heart.
Okay.
So as you think about it, if it needs to go through and get all the way there, then that's fine. Okay. So first one here is old Bibles, pictures, books. So what do you see? What do you think there? What's the heart say?
So yeah, looking at that particular picture, I just think about just literature, literary art, seeing the age of the books. It's like stories that transcend my lifetime. They were years past. I'm just thankful that people have given of their life in their own story for the formation of where I am right now. And I'm so thankful for the way that literature and art has affected my life deeply. So when I look at that, it just kind of moves me, because I think about how important works of art and writing have been in my own story and forming who I am as a person. So yeah, I'm thankful. I'm really grateful for those.
Awesome. Next picture is a cup of coffee, which we know that Mr. Sheezy likes. Important.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my heart when I see coffee is connection. I just love a shared table. There's something about sitting across from one another and sharing a cup. There's just meaning, depth, purpose to those moments. I think about the conversations I've had over a cup of coffee. I think about tears that have been shed over a cup of coffee. Just hope that has been established over a cup of coffee. So it's really a deep thing to me. As much as I dig coffee shops, and trying new things connected to coffee, I do really feel like it is a heart thing for me. It's really important as a part of my life.
That's awesome.
Awesome, great. Next one is a picture of a microphone.
Yeah. I think when I look at that picture, I just see the potential for the chance to open the Word with people and invite people into the story of God. Man, what a privilege to be amplified in front of a group of people, no matter whatever size it is. I love even that picture right there is so ambiguous in that you see the microphone, but you don't know how big the room is that the microphone is in front of. And so I think that there's significance to that in my own life. When I talk about what brings me passion, communicating and sharing the truth of God on one of those is important to me. But the number of people who are receiving that message isn't really as important. It's just kind of what's happening. And so when I see that microphone, I just see a chance to be amplified, to invite people into the story of God. And it becomes just very sobering. It's a challenge to look at that and know that it's important to steward that microphone, to not just flippantly and frivolously approach that microphone, but to take great care anytime it's in front of you.
Absolutely.
Like I said, I've sat in that crowd when you've had that microphone.
Me too.
Massively. I think we both have been massively moved by all the stuff that you've said to us many times. So
wow.
Picture of the wife.
Yeah, I just think of Grace. I can't believe that she married me.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable. So just grace. It's God's grace in one picture. She's just everything on earth for me. And I'm so grateful that God has allowed her to be a part of my life. And, we were just talking this morning and just thinking about how much we've grown together and individually. And it's just, man, God's grace just continually on display in our lives. So I'm thankful. I look at that picture, I can't believe it. It's bananas.
Awesome. And the final one.
Oh, man.
For the children's.
Yeah, I think it's a continuation of that same thing. I look at Noah, my firstborn, and just what a picture of relief comes to my mind. We experienced loss and never knew if we'd be able to carry full term in pregnancy. And to have Noah was just this grand miracle to us. And we didn't know if we'd have any more children. We thought he might be our one. And we loved him well and were fully present with him in the journey. And then God blessed us with Micah, our now 6-month-old. And, I just look at that and I think, man, what a great opportunity to both enter into relationship and steward well these young lives. And man, the privilege and the sobering responsibility of what it means to be a dad to those boys is just is incredible. So Love is probably the easiest way to just sum it all up without all the talking.
We're all dads of dudes.
Yeah,
there you go.
Look at boys, man.
There it is.
Look at boys. My last one's this. I brought it instead of having a picture of it.
Oh, that's
When
cool.
you see this thing, what is it, man? I'm just holding up his book. I'm holding up Soul Rest. When you see this finished, like just here, I'm holding it, man.
Yeah,
That's
I
that.
can't believe that that's true. It's, I have such a respect for the first picture you showed, of those books. I have such a respect for literary art and authorship, and I don't flippantly think about the idea of writing a book and just go, man, well, just putting together a book and I'm just going to figure out a way to put it out there. Like, it was just such a sobering and challenging idea to have the audacity to allow this work to go out into the world. And when I look at that, I just can't believe that it's true. It was a lot of hard work, but it was an expression, I believe, of what God was doing in my heart and in my life. It was a snapshot of a moment in time in life. And so I think about all of the stories and just the factors that went into the creation of that book. But ultimately, I look at it as this element of hope in my own life that maybe I could be a servant to others who are in a similar position that I was in, that I wrote about in the book. I'm hopeful that book can be an encouragement and a resource to people who are looking to find rest.
Awesome.
Y'all out there can grab it.
Oh yeah, that's good. It's good. So, in your opinion, what is the greatest threat and obstacle to people actually finding rest?
Yeah, there's a quote by Eugene Peterson, and he says, "Busyness is the illness of spirit."
Wow.
Or an illness of spirit.
Yeah.
And I think that really is, honestly, the biggest obstacle. Is like, we can be so consumed with doing and moving and going that we never stop to consider what it means to find rest.
Yeah.
It's funny when you think about just the commandment of the Sabbath. In Exodus 28, it says, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Nobody really thinks a lot about what it means to actually keep the Sabbath holy.
Mm-hmm.
It says, for 6 days you shall labor, on the seventh day no one will work. No one in your house, none of the people will work for you. It's just supposed to take a break. And what he was getting at, even back then, all the way to 2018, was the Sabbath is significant because when you stop, you can acknowledge that it is only the work of God that is truly significant. The other thing that you realize in Sabbathing and stopping and resting is you get to ask the question, is God enough for me? And usually our answer is no, if we're honest.
Wow.
I remember when I first went into this season of what I now can articulate as a sabbatical, like just a time of rest. I felt like God was saying, I had stepped away from vocational ministry. I had stopped doing a bunch of stuff. I had been volunteering at the local high school, the Boys and Girls Club. I had a good name in our community. I was helping people, doing all this stuff. And stepping away from that, I felt like God was saying, now that I've taken away all of the things that you're known for, will you love and worship me with the same passion? Is it still the same for you? And completely and totally honestly, I knew immediately the answer was no. It wasn't. Because I realized how much of my identity and my value, my worth, and even my energy of worshiping God was interwoven in the things that I got to do for God.
Wow.
And so Sabbath ultimately is God asking us, am I enough for you? And I think the reason we have a hard time with Sabbath or stopping or resting, and one of those barriers that you're talking about of that happening, is because we're afraid of the answer when we do stop and consider. And I'll tell you from my own experience, when stopping and resting, I was confronted with the true nature of myself. I couldn't perform my way through it. I couldn't just do things out of function.
Yeah.
But now I have to actually ask the question, just you and I, is it enough? And man, crazily enough, no, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the journey for me. That was the beginning of this whole process. And I think that the barrier for us is, of course, if we're just always going, then we're never stopping.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's key to just to recognize it alone.
Right.
It is the start of that process to find it.
Right.
But so often we're going so fast, it's like, it's a big blur.
That's right.
I absolutely get it.
And
Absolutely.
to that, like going so fast, and that is like, what is your greatest fear on this topic? I mean, this is some important stuff. So what's your greatest kind of fear around this?
Yeah, I think anytime you, so this goes back to you were asking, how do I feel when I look at that book? Just, our insecurities and our humanity are beasts.
Yeah.
They rise up and they are fully present at times when unchecked. And I think for me, there's a potential for the fear that it will be an inadequate addressing of the message, that it wouldn't be substantive enough for people to be able to see clearly what I believe to be God's intention for us to find rest. Another fear, like apart from that piece, so that's just like the potential in my own humanity. I think that the fear that I find with any issue as it pertains to understanding the character and the desire of God is one that I've found in my own life over and over again, which is that I will see it as significant for a time, and even as it's been significant for a moment, it will be important, but then kind of fade from my view and then not be as important, and we find ourselves right back in the rhythm of the things that we've done before. So even as I've had the privilege of opening the Word with smaller groups of people, doing some classes and some learning communities around this idea, one of the biggest things that I really try to drive home is this thought that maybe we could continue the conversation not only with each other, but even with ourselves, so that we can keep it before us. Because the great fear is that we'll find relief in finding rest in rhythms of the way that we live on earth, but then fall right back into what we've known always as the rhythm and the routine of life and busyness. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that is so important as a preface isn't really answering your question specifically, but I think is vitally important, is to give yourself the permission to rest.
Yeah.
And that may sound like elementary or
Sure.
like a 101 kind of thing, but I think that's the biggest obstacle that I've found is it's okay to rest. It's okay to take some time to be intentional about finding those rhythms of rest in your own life, because it feels like we need to keep going. If we're going to truly show our significance and value as people, or if you would frame it like saying, if I'm going to show my value and worth to God, I need to keep going. I need to keep working.
Right.
But I remember God said to me in this process, when you're unable to rest, it's like you're saying, I'm unable to do my work without your help.
Yeah.
So you talk about a challenge.
Yeah.
So that's what I realized. It's like,
Yeah.
man, I realized that I think I'm helping God by keeping going. And he's saying, I can do what I need to do.
Yeah.
You need to rest,
Wow.
So individually for me, I think it's been a journey, and I think it'll continue to be a journey to figure out where to find and how to find rest. There's a number of things that I even kind of listed out in the book as far as like these restful rhythms that
Sure.
I've begun to practice.
Yeah.
Some of those are getting out into nature, biblical meditation, prayer, fasting, withholding, generosity. These are all things that I feel like have become a part of intentional thoughts about how to find rest. But I think the first thing from a practical sense that we do is on Fridays, which is today, we really just kind of set ourselves to life-giving and life-building kind of endeavors.
Okay.
So for us, that's really, this is family day for us. So Fridays are super chill. They become these days that are filled with things that are just so rich and good and building up for our family.
Yeah.
And that really kind of encompasses about a 24-hour period. We kind of tone down the noise, so to speak, of what's going on outside, and we just lean in and focus on each other and talk a lot about who God is and what he's doing in our lives. The other thing is we do on Sundays, so we work at a church.
Sure.
I work at a church, and on Sunday afternoons we do what we call Family Sabbath. And
Now
so we try to be very intentional to contend and fight for that. Another kind of very practical thing, which is a bit smaller, but I found to be very important for me, is on a daily basis, I've made this commitment to, before I leave the house, not allow any incoming or outgoing correspondence to happen on my phone or through news, anything.
Yes.
Like, so now I know this is a challenging idea for some. For me, it's really kind of developed into something that has been so life-giving, but I don't take any text messages, I don't check my email, I don't even look at the news, I don't look at websites, anything, because what I found is it establishes my day from a place of advancing rather than reaction, you know? I'm kind of moving forward into the day versus responding to all the things that are coming at me. And that 2-hour period, you know, if I wake up at 6 and I leave the house at 8, you know, it seems like a lot, especially to start, but I've found that, you know, the world keeps on moving without me having to check my email or whatever. And so that's been a big thing for me too. I could talk about these things all day, but those are probably the 3 things that have become most practically and acutely restful for us as a family.
Yeah, I can totally speak into that as well. I've same kind of thing. Like I'm not going to look at my phone for the first, whether it's the first hour of my day. I like how you put it, super practical. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to do it until I leave the house. I mean, that's huge. You know, that little practical thing right there. Same with Sundays. We call it Sabbath Sundays. You know, and just like, but you have, like you said, you have to fight for it. It can't just be this passive, flippant thing like, oh, we'll see, we're going to try to do that on Sunday. It's more like, no, this is protected, meaning that often means you have to say no to things. Same with that morning protected time, like that means I have to say no to turning on or checking my emails. So it's huge, man. I love that practical stuff.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny because even, you know, on the iPhone recently, they just did an update which allows you to even regulate your app usage. Like you can
that's pretty cool.
Set timers basically for like the apps that are on your phone. So you could say, I only want to use...
Way to go, Apple.
Yeah, I mean, it's really
that's
incredible.
Huge.
And then there's also like a screen time thing, which basically tells you how much you've used your phone specifically to each app.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And obviously any of those things can become legalistic and just yet another way to work, you know.
Right.
But I think when you start asking the why behind the what, those kinds of tools become super helpful.
Wow, it sounds like Apple's getting a hint of rest.
Come on now. Somebody said Tim Cook a book, man. Come on.
I love it. Hey man, we're gonna get into a couple more personal, fun questions, all right? But would you rather people not come to your wedding or not go to your funeral?
Funeral. Easy. I'm a people person, man. I'm a relationship-centered individual, and I'm not going to be at the funeral, so I don't care if you come or not. You know what I'm saying?
That's so well put. That was great. That was great.
Yeah, it's easy for me right there.
Yeah, but the wedding it's party
I'm going to be
time.
there. I'm going to be at the wedding. It's going down.
All right, we call this time joy time. All right,
Okay.
so these are quick off-the-cuff answers. Favorite cereal?
Golden Grams.
Oh, come on now.
Yes.
I like it. I love Golden Grams. Are you a lark or an owl?
Owl.
Really? Night owl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, easy.
Come on now. All right, here we go. Math and science or history, English?
History, English.
Okay.
Take out the history.
Just go straight English.
Yeah. Math, because math, when I was in college, my motto during math class was D for diploma. So that's how I feel about math right there. And history, I'm not, you know, I dig history in a sense, but literature, English.
Stick with the English.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Guitar or piano?
Piano.
Okay. High five or a hug?
Oh, high five all day. I love the hug, but high five. I'm trying to bring the high five back. I've been working with you.
Come on, bro.
I've been trying
Let's
with
do
you.
it.
I'm trying.
Join
It's not working though.
I have to pause. This man got 50 high fives in a row at Disney World when we went and took.
See, I love that.
50 in a row. Nobody denied him. 50 for 50.
Now this is what's crazy. So I've been trying. Trying to follow suit and. You know, working at a church, you know, you have a chance to do announcements, things like that from time to time. And you know, churches, they have a time where you say, well, you turn and greet your neighbor or whatever.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of trying to slide it in there. Like, hey, give somebody a high five.
There you go.
Trying to bring the high five. It's not working. I don't know if it's something about the setting or what, but they just kind of look at me like, and then shake hands.
I love it. All right, European vacation or tropical island getaway?
Man, my dream is to go to London. So
really?
It's got to be European vacation.
Right.
I've never been.
Okay.
It's a dream. So
okay, good to know. All right, you have 5 minutes to spare. Text or a phone call?
A phone call. Yeah, because I feel like I would love to have a conversation.
Yeah.
If possible.
There you go. Okay, got it. Love it. Brad, you got any more questions coming up?
No, I don't.
Okay, this has been great.
My last one.
We also want to know, we want listeners to know how they can get a hold of you, how they can get your book. Is there a website they can go to? Fill us in what that is.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to connect with both me and the book is soulrestbook.com.
Okay.
Soulrestbook.com. Yeah, I've not really been on social media much lately, so I don't want to promise that I'd be able to connect back with you in case I'm not in there.
Yeah.
So soulrestbook.com, you can connect with me, shoot me a message, find out more about the book, kind of what it's all on, and then you can always find the book on Amazon. It's where most people buy their books anyway, so soulrestbook.com.
Awesome. Highly recommended. Awesome.
Totally agree. So last question. You've obviously started with your heart, right? What advice would you give to somebody who wants to start with their heart? Like they just want to do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've learned, even in this season, as I've been praying and asking God to lead and guide and direct in my steps, is for that to happen, you need to just take the next right step. I think that's the best advice I could give anyone who is seeking to quote unquote do anything. I think so often, I've been stuck in the place where I've been thinking about what is the thing that I'm supposed to do in the future. Like, how is it supposed to look? Like, what will unfold? How do I get there? Like, this big 30,000 foot view perspective of what it means to know what's happening in the future. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with goals. I try to be very specific with goals. I've been trying to write them down and be very, very articulate about them lately. But I think the thing that I realized is I can get stuck in the aspirational idea of what could happen in the future if I feel like I'm trying to teleport to that, in just some big grandiose way. But if I could just simply take the next right step, do the next thing that I know is the thing that I'm supposed to do today, that responding to the leading of the Spirit and what God is saying to me right now, just taking the next right step and not trying to figure out how it all will unfold, but what can I do today to respond to the thing that I know to be true in my heart right now? Like, what is the thing that I cannot help but to live from that is stirring in my heart today? And when you do that, you begin to see things unfold in ways that you can't even begin to describe. So,
Great advice, man. Thanks so much for spending time with us today, CZ. Some major wisdom. I'm jazzed up. Continue reading the book, and you guys go grab that book. It's awesome. It's already given to me. I know it has to Danny as well.
I'm at rest at this table, man.
Come on.
He's out. He's out. Again, my name's Brad Stinson. Our guest was CZ. My co-host, Danny Williamson. Again, Start With Heart podcast, hosted by The Collective. We out.